The Minister of Finance, Godongwana, presenting that budget, and yes, he did raise that value-added tax. Instead of the 2 percentage points that were proposed at the beginning, we are now sitting at 1 percentage points, but over the next 2 years. Okay, so what gives? Let me introduce my panelists. I have with me in studio Mzimasi Mabece, Head of Fixed Income, Melville Douglas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
We also have with us Khulekani Mathe, CEO of Business Unity South Africa. Khulekani, welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon.
And last but not least, Tsanga Mkumba, Tax Associate, Becker McKenzie. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
Let me begin with you, Khulekani, and get your impressions of the delayed budget that finally was presented today. I want to know if there's anything in it that surprised you.
Well, not much surprised me. Firstly, I think it was a relief for the minister himself to be able to actually table the budget today. And I think it was a relief for everybody because leading up to this, there were all kinds of noises about disagreements continuing within the government of national unity. So the fact that it was tabled, I think, was a point of relief. I mean, beyond that, we knew, at least, the leaks about the fact that there was going to be a VAT hike as a compromise, not at 2%, but at a slightly lower. Now we know it's 0.5%, at least for this year. So I think there were no surprises. This is not to say that it was good.
Yeah.
Raising taxes in any economy is never good.
I was actually going to ask you, was it a good budget?
Well, it was not. Yeah.
It was not the 2 percentage points that he wanted to do at the beginning. It was 1 percentage point and 1 percentage point over the next 2 years. Does that make a difference?
Look, I think in the context of what the minister was dealing with and trying to balance the book, I think it makes sense, and I think it sort of eases the pain, as it were. But I think, as I have said, the fact that we've had to come to the point where raising taxes is what we're looking at suggests that over time we have let ourselves down as a country. And this is why we're here.
Yeah, I'm remembering I was talking to a friend of mine and he was saying, well, the minister's got a variety of options in front of him. One, of course, is the easy one, which is the VAT one. And then, of course, you could have raised other taxes as well, or you could have gone and borrowed, or you could have done the big deed and cut spending. We'll come back and talk about that. Let's bring in the other voices in the conversation. Tsanga, let me come to you. I think we all were waiting. Was it going to be 2 percentage points? Was it going to be 1 percentage point or just 0.5 percentage point? When the 1 percentage point over 2 years came through, from a tax perspective, was that the easier option for the minister?
Definitely. I think the minister had a tough call to make. He needs to find the money somewhere. Cutting expenditure in the current environment where we've had fiscal consolidation for the past, since 2020 approximately, would be a difficult thing to do. So yeah, it was the most palatable option that he was faced with at the moment.
We all fixated, of course, on that 1 percentage point. Yes, half a percentage point this year, another half a percentage point next year. If indeed the economy does not grow fast enough, I think that was the caveat that it put in place. I did see someone suggesting that the presumptions that the minister is making are also a little bit problematic, and it leaves him with very little room for error. I want your comment on that. That's one side. The other side I wanted to talk about is that consolidation story that you spoke about. I want the evidence of it.
Sure. So on the consolidation point, there has been an increase in expenditure, sure, consistent track since the consolidation measures were put in place. But I think the key difference is the zero-based budgeting, where we have to build and justify every rand that we are allocated. It kind of changes the approach and the mentality that comes with the budgeting process and the expenditure itself.
And in addition to that, of course, this wasn't just one tax that was increased. We stuck on that one. But what about the other taxes, the usuals?
Definitely. So we saw excise taxes increased. I personally thought that that was low-hanging fruit for the minister, and that he would hit us with a well
I'm
above.
looking at you. I'm looking at you. 7%, right? Let's not call 6.8%. 7%, and you're saying low-hanging fruit.
Definitely, because it's the most politically acceptable.
Yeah.
It's you're not going to ruffle too many feathers when you tax luxury yachts and
Yeah.
expensive whiskey
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all doing the calculations. We're all doing the calculations. Zumaisi, let me come to you. Your initial impressions, as I said, I think the minister had a variety of options, one of which could have been increased borrowings, but it did announce a few initiatives, including the launch of that, or the coming of the first infrastructure bond. But let me get your initial reaction.
Look, I think we can all agree around this table that indeed this was a very difficult budget to put, and I dare say very contested
10 parties.
budget
Yeah.
to put in place. But having said so, we are currently borrowing at 10.5%, and this economy is growing nominally at 4.5% at best. So obviously, it is no wonder our our interest cost is about 22 cents for every R1. So to borrow more in this environment, I think it would be suicidal. And what we saw in this budget, we saw that he did not increase the borrowing.
Yeah.
But the only thing that he did, which I think is positive, is that he is introducing an infrastructural bond.
Yes.
And that is meant for one thing and one thing only:
Infrastructure.
infrastructure. And as the president had said in his State of the Nation address, that
Yeah.
to unlock the levers of this economy,
Yeah.
we need to do that through infrastructure.
Sure.
And for instance, in the next 3 years, he'll spend about 1 trillion, which is almost half this national budget
Yeah.
on infrastructure. So that's the positive for me. But of course, it is well and good to have these lofty ideas, but it's the implementation thereof.
Absolutely.
So I think for me, the test will be in the implementation.
Right. In the media, we try to simplify these things. So one of the things we do is we say, whose budget was this one? And when we try to break it down, I said to my colleagues, I think this is a business budget. Because if you look at the R1 trillion, and as you now put it in context, almost half of the budget is targeted at infrastructure. It should be a good budget for business. What about for the markets from a fixed income perspective?
Well, the fixed income market should react positively to this budget. Before I left the office and actually looked at what the 10-year bond was doing,
Yeah.
I mean, it ticked up initially. It was very nervous, and I think it ticked up to around about 10.6.
I thought someone had leaked something.
Absolutely, absolutely. But before I left the office, it was back to almost where it was trading opening day, meaning which it is very much comfortable. But of course, it is trading. It is trading very cautiously.
Yeah.
Because as I said, the proof is always in the implementation.
100%.
And if you look at the currencies as well,
Yeah.
initially they were quite nervous, and they're back to where
Yeah.
pretty much where they were. So, did the capital markets react positively to it? To say yes would be far-fetched.
Sure.
But I think what they did, they responded cautiously.
Right.
So they're adopting this very cautious approach.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to your point, whose budget was this?
Yeah.
Was it pro-business?
Yeah.
Was it pro-poor? And I think there's something for all of us.
Almost everyone.
Absolutely.
Right. Kulekana, I'm looking at you. And I'm looking at you because someone also tried to put together a list of who are the winners here and who are the losers here. And the losers, to a degree, if you look at the increase in the VAT rate, would be all consumer. But on the other hand, as we're discussing now, this infrastructure story that the budget has sort of focused on, I wanted your thoughts whether, one, the numbers that are talked about here are enough, and whether government has got the credibility to say these numbers coming out will make a difference in the future. Because I am remembering Trillion when Jacob Zuma was president. And I remember construction companies going to the wall, even though we're talking about spending R1 trillion on infrastructure in this country.
So you took words out of my mouth there, Godfrey. But I think we've got to take the minister at his word. So there is clearly
Does he have the credibility?
a
I'm sorry to digress a
signal.
little bit.
There's clearly a signal in his speech that he wants to invest in infrastructure, and that can only be good. But I think the track record of this government is not a really good one. So the question that my colleague raises about, the proof is in the proof of this pudding is in the eating.
Yeah.
We will have to see whether those projects are actually implemented. So that, I think, is where we are a little worried. I think what was good here, though, is the commitment by obviously this government and the minister to reforms under Operation Vulindlela, because those reforms have really done some great things for this economy. But I do go back to the point that we find ourselves in a situation that we shouldn't be in. So let me give you a number that the minister gave. He says, since 2013, there were 230 expenditure reviews. These are reports on the programs being assessed, how they're performing. What did the government do? It sat on those reports. It did absolutely nothing. Today we have to raise taxes because we did not act in more than 10 years when the reports, those reviews were telling us that some programs aren't doing what they're meant to. They should be either reformed or they should be discontinued altogether.
He did say that the president has committed to ensuring that those reviews get acted upon. And he's going to set up a committee that's going to look at those recommendations as part of a general audit, which is also going to be looking for ghost workers. I don't know, how do you find them? It must be pretty hard to find.
Well, they could find them at PRASA, so clearly there must be a methodology that you can deploy to, I mean, actually it can be done to make sure that everybody,
Yeah. Talk a little bit, if you will, about the commitment of the government to reform. Someone said it could be, you could say they're trying to do a Doge, if you like, an Elon Musk-like task to try and see if they can cut government spending. Are you convinced that given the challenges that we have, number one, and then given also the construction of the government that we have, they'll be able to do so? Do you have confidence from a business perspective?
We would like them to do so. I think the environment requires them to do so because you simply cannot continue with spending as if all was well. It's not well. And if we don't take the tough actions, in 2 years' time, the minister will be facing the prospect of another tax raise because the spending simply continues to grow. So I think the fact that there was this uncomfortable postponement of the budget, which was uncomfortable for everybody, will hopefully spur the minister and everybody in government on to actually take some of the tough actions.
I wonder everyone's thoughts on the 1 percentage point. I'm going to begin with you, Tsanga, because this is your area of expertise. But in addition to that, I also wondered your thoughts on the increase in the budget of the South African Revenue Services. I think we all were witness, I don't know if all of us were witness indeed, to that public exposure of the rift, or what appeared to be a rift between the commissioner.
The mic was off.
What did you make of that increase in the budget of the commissioner?
Sure. I think, SARS has always been a front runner when it comes to the institutions and organs of state. It's always been highly efficient. It's always been standing head and shoulders above the rest, which is obviously necessary because you need to fund the system. If you allow the funding entity to collapse, then the whole system collapses.
Someone should have told Jacob Zuma.
So I think, SARS has been doing really spectacular things with enforcement recently. And as we all do e-filing, we see that it is a world-class institution, and funding it to close that collection gap of 800 billion is, to me, a low-hanging fruit, and it will definitely bear fruit, definitely.
So one of the things that the commissioner spoke about was that if you increase taxes, then you begin to deal with a whole host of issues, tax avoidance. Then there's the other words that he uses that have to do with morality and taxes and all of that. Does the 1 percentage point increase put us in that zone, or is that too little to make a difference and he should still be able to do his job in addition to collecting the higher taxes?
Sure. So when we talk about the increase of tax, reducing lower yields as we increase, that's really more applicable to things like corporate income tax and personal income tax, because there the incentivization to try and hide or avoid is much stronger. With the indirect tax like VAT, the push would only come when somebody chooses to not buy something because of the VAT.
Right.
So the likelihood there is a little bit reduced.
It's a blind instrument. It
Exactly.
collects.
It collects. So
Absolutely.
that's why they resort to it.
Yeah. Are you not concerned? What about the resources? Sorry, that's the other second part to my question.
Sure. So resourcing SARS, I mean, they do need the resources, and the estimation was with an additional 3 billion rand, they'd be able to collect close to 50 billion rand.
Yeah.
And I think that return on investment is sound.
Yeah.
SARS does need additional capital to put into technology. The commissioner was recently speaking about the AI initiatives that they're putting through the system. And, you know, they really need the funds to enable, to see those projects through, to really yield the results.
Yeah. Zimasi, I want your thoughts as well. Come in, if you will. I'm coming back to you because I want to know if you're worried about the survival of the government of national unity, because the DA, after that speech had been delivered, said they do not support the budget, and it was in a statement. So it's not like the leader of the DA just reacted to a question being asked. They actually put together a statement. But I wanted to know if there's anything in that budget that you particularly liked as well from a capital markets perspective when you look into the next year and the year after. One of the numbers I saw was the debt to GDP ratio now peaking. The minister is promising 76.2%, I think, and he's talking this fiscal year.
No, absolutely. Even though if when you look at where that debt peaks, it's slightly higher than, for instance, what was in the medium-term budget policy statement,
right.
but it still peaks this financial year, and then it reduces in the outer years.
Yeah.
But for me, and I think this is what the capital market is responding to.
Right.
It is that demonstration of commitment
Yeah.
to fiscal consolidation.
It's alive.
It's very much aligned to that, despite the pressures and the fiscal challenges that this government faces.
Yeah.
It is still very much committed to fiscal consolidation. And then the other thing that I would want to say as far as that VAT is concerned, because, for instance, I mean, if the commissioner says if he's given the necessary resources, which I think the minister has extended to him in this budget, if he says he can collect about 800 million, that falls through the cracks, then what that means is that 1 trillion infrastructural spend could be funded just from revenue collections,
Right.
without necessarily increasing taxes. You know, so for me, the advantage would be if indeed that 800 million that fell through the cracks or continues to fall through the cracks could be collected, some of these spending pressures would be very much alleviated.
Absolutely.
You know? And you would not only not need to increase VAT, but taxes across the board.
Absolutely. We're running out of time. Kulekani, I'd like you to come in, please. I made the point that if the DA were to walk away from this government of national unity over a percentage point or a 0.5 percentage point increase in the VAT rate, I'd be questioning the sanity of their politicians. But I'm a journalist, I can say those things. What about you?
I don't think they'll walk away. I think that they realize just what that would do to a whole range of things, and so I think they will try to push as hard as they can for either a rejection of this budget by Parliament.
Yeah.
We don't know how that's going to play out, but my view is they're not going to walk away.
Yeah, I heard the vote is likely to be sometime in May or thereabouts. That's when we're going to see, what do they say? The rubber hits the tarmac. We'll get the proof of the pudding then. Let's round up. So overall, your thoughts in respect to what the minister did today?
If we just took today and did not look at the past, we would say, under the circumstances, the minister has done well, a very great balancing act, and that based on what he said, the future should look a lot better. But if you take the history into account, you begin to question in some instances whether some of these will be implemented. And I think you have to say that we must hold this government accountable. We've been too understanding as South Africans and cutting them some slack, and this is why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Tsanga?
Thanks. I think, what I take out of this budget is really what's new. So what's new is the emphasis on the public-private partnerships.
Right.
And I think
True. You spoke about Operation Vulindlela, right?
Exactly. So inviting the private sector into these key industries and, allowing them to assist will really be a catalytic effect. And I think that's one. We always focus on the tax increases and the allocations, but the orientation of government is also critically important in this. And I think that really demonstrates an opportunity for the private sector.
Absolutely.
I think for me, given the pressures that the finance minister was under, it is easy to be populist under these circumstances. The fact that he still demonstrates his commitment to fiscal consolidation, I think for me that's a positive.
Yeah, for the markets, that's the word that they want to hear, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a positive for me. Because think about it, any government that has lost the popular vote and wants to win favor with the electorate, there's always a temptation to be populist.
Absolutely.
And I think that temptation was avoided in this budget, and it is a very much a
And
good
we're
thing.
living in the shadow, of course, of that great divide that we have now witnessed between the United States and South Africa. We didn't talk about it, which is the whole in part that the minister was trying to fill. But gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Thank you. So that was Mzimasi Mabethe, head of fixed income, Melville Douglas, along with Kulekani Mate, CEO Business Unit South Africa, and Tsanga Mukumba, tax associate, Becca McKenzie, with our first take on the budget that was presented by the minister.